Jeremy, how are you doing today?
Doing all right, thank you. I will do my best to keep to the 3 minutes, by the way. So I'm Jeremy, and I work at a little company called Firetail. We do some API and AI log stuff. And one of the challenges that I've been trying to solve is what do you do when you have kind of incomplete data and can LLMs make informed responses around them? So one of the things we capture from part of our product is user prompts to different engines. So this is, for instance, a prompt that I sent to Google Gemini earlier. We capture this via a browser extension, but that's a very incomplete transaction. So I've been trying to find ways to enrich it. And to be honest, I'd been banging my head against a wall because I was always getting kind of like unsatisfactory responses. So I decided to try a completely different approach to this. And I'm not going to run too many of my prompts today because they all take a long time to process. But I actually decided, like, what if I go into this assuming that I know nothing about it and actually just like work with the LLM to build the prompts instead of me building the prompts and iterating off of that. So I actually started by just taking a download of all of the requests that I could get from this into a CSV format, uploaded it to the LLM, first asked it to identify, like, do you even recognize what's going on here? And it did a pretty good job of understanding that we're getting like one half of the equation, just getting the API request logs. And it did a good job of understanding most of it. It did miss up some of the metadata, and I'll come to that in just a second. But I then went through the process of telling it, like, I'm not going to write the prompt. You write the prompt for me that I'm going to send back to you for the analysis. And I wondered if I would actually get better data classification results with that than I got on my own. And I had two primary use cases that I was trying to tackle. One was around figuring out if data was sensitive, and another was around anomaly detection. And what I realized that, like, it knows how to give itself a role better than I had thought about previously. It also knows like a good set of starting points for the different like enrichments and tags that it's going to do. What it did mess up on, though, we found very early on was it failed on figuring out how to parse the data. So going back to what the other gentleman presented around like LLMs and JSON, but then we figured out, like, if I told it explicitly to give itself instructions on fixing that, then it did pretty well. And I kind of show you what it ended up doing. So starts with, it gave itself basically a pre-processing step of parsing the data to understand what all is going on with it and to make sure that you work through all of that stuff. Then it goes into the output requirements. As I worked through it, I got to a point where I was getting good enough results that I could actually kind of trust them. And so you'll notice, like, out of 1,000 some requests, it flagged correctly true for an IP category in something like 0.5% of cases, which was actually more or less what we expected it to be. Successfully gave us back JSON with the unique IDs that we needed to associate it to the thing. I know I'm over time, so I'll just finish with one last lesson learned from this. We had a second use case around anomaly detection. And what we actually found was when we went to try to combine it, we either would have failures on the DLP side or on the anomaly detection side, where it would indicate that everything was an anomaly or nothing had IP. So we actually found that, like, splitting that into two separate prompts where we end up having to process the same set of data twice gave us better results than trying to combine them. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Moon.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of questions. I think the initial reaction is the same one I had, which is this is the benefit of a gigantic context window, I guess. Like if I try to
Yeah.
feed most of the stuff I have access to, it's not going to do 80% of that.
Yeah, so to that point, I also found that, like, if I didn't want to spend a ton of money on it, the only one that I could go to that had a large enough context window was Google Gemini, that got bundled into our Google Workspace subscription. Like, probably like a lot of people, it got, it was a value add that was kind of forced into our subscription a couple years ago when we renewed. But it turns out to be helpful for exactly this context window limitation problem.
That's fantastic. I didn't even know that. And then the other one is um this is something I don't have a lot of experience with myself, but I've heard other people doing it, which is you use the LLM to create sort of a training model, and that model runs much faster, right? Have you thought about then you can just stream logs into it, right?
I didn't get that far yet. So this is literally in the last couple of days, but that is exactly like where we should go next so that we can do that. One thing I will say we also learned on the token utilization side is that like to get good results, your prompt gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But to that point, you end up not wanting to process each log file individually because then you have your input tokens being your prompt plus the log file. And the log file is tiny in comparison to the prompt, but then you're paying for like all those input prompts with every single transaction. And so what you want to do is actually batch them up to a point where it's a reasonable ratio between your system prompt and your input data. And so like on Bedrock, for instance, there's this caching concept where you can like cache the prompt and then batch process log files into it and have a much lower cost ratio, if that makes sense.
That does makes perfect sense. I think I'm not the only one who just wrote down Bedrock, by the way.
Okay. We just learned about Bedrock caching, by the way, like literally, and again in the last couple of days as we've been working on this.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
Oh, thank you.
happy to. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeremy. Really appreciate it.